All right. I appreciate everyone who is joining us for this new video. This is our first time trying an idea that I'm hoping is going to catch on and be a lot of fun. I'm trying to introduce new ways in which we can discuss and grow in our knowledge of the Bible and just teach the Bible to people as well. And one of the ideas that come to me was this great Bible challenge, this opportunity to have a couple guests come in and argue from their perspective, not confrontationally, not cruelly, or not trying to fight with one another, but just give a quick thought. We're giving 2-minute answers to each question. We're just going to give our quick thoughts as to why we think our answer is the best answer to the questions that are provided. So the questions tonight, I'll go ahead and introduce those right off the bat, are who was the greatest judge in the book of Judges? We do have a very specific caveat there that it has to be in the book of Judges, because one thing we're trying to avoid is anybody throwing out trump cards like Samuel. It's going to be a little hard to argue against Samuel if somebody threw that out there. So we're trying to keep it in a very narrow window with answers to questions like this. Second question we'll be answering is, aside from Jesus, who is the greatest example of humility in the Bible? The third question is, what is the most common cause of prayers being answered with a no? So there's several causes in the Bible. We're going to argue what is the most common one, what we believe is the reason most people get a no. And then on top of that, we have a question that is one that I feel like is going to be my weak subject, but we'll see. And that is, what one book besides the Bible would you recommend to every believer? And so each of us is picking a book that we really enjoy, and we're going to present. There's not going to be a lot of, room for facts and information on that one. This is just going to be our quick plea from the heart as to why I like this book and think everybody should. So somebody has to pay us royalties for selling their book for them at the end of all. But these are just some questions I thought would be the kind of questions that it's hard to be dogmatic about. It's hard to get upset because somebody disagrees with you on one of these. The truth is, because whoever submits their answers first gets to keep the answer, and then you have to pick something else. It's very possible that we don't even necessarily think our answer is the best one. It's the best one that was left. That's part of the fun of this, is sometimes you have to go and dig a little deeper and find reasons to appreciate a character that maybe you didn't appreciate as much before. And so even for us as the ones doing this, I think it provides an opportunity to look at the Bible in a little bit of a different way and enjoy doing so. That's why it's a game. That's why there will be points awarded. There will be a winner at the end of this. And so I'll start by introducing our judge. Our judge for today is Brother Jesse Hailey, pastor of Elk Point Baptist Church in Elk Point, South Dakota. He will not be biased to me because we have a similar last name. There's no blood relation there. We're just brothers in Christ. And I have not paid him, so I don't have the money to pay for winning this. So other people have offered to pay him in the chat before we got started. But at this point, as far as I know, we're fair and unbiased. But Brother Hailey is going to be our official judge. What I'm going to encourage those watching to do is to also pass your own judgment, to come up with your ideas. At the end, when everything's presented, at the end of each round, you submit your answers. Put them in the comment who you think was the winner. And maybe when I do the next one, we'll mention if the comments disagreed with the judge. So your voice will not go unheard that way. But anyways, that's the way we'll be doing this. Because this is the first one, I'll be participating. I decided to go ahead and get my hands dirty and get involved in this. So I'll be participating as well today. And so if you don't know me, I'm Brother Junior Hailey. I'm missionary in Belgium. Currently, I'm a missionary pastor of the Gent Baptist Church here in Belgium. And then I'll introduce, if you want to add any extra titles or anything, if you want to be known as, the greatest of all time or something like that, that's your business. But we have also with us Brother Abraham Kline. Brother Kline is an evangelist stationed out of Pennsylvania, has several ministries he does there as part of his church and just around the community. And then Brother Brent Hoffman, missionary to Costa Rica, who has all these men are no stranger to our YouTube and to our church ministries and stuff. They've been involved in a lot of things before. Brother Hoffman is the first man to sign up for this. He was the brave one to get onto this on the ground floor and volunteer. These other fellows have come in to help fill out and help me with this, because I think they'll enjoy it as well. But anyways, you fellas have anything you need to say before we get started?
No.
I didn't know if you wanted to give yourself an official title.
Not really.
Okay. I didn't know if anybody wanted to correct me about countries or states or wherever they're at. So uh, if I was the judge, it'd be easier for me to be dogmatic about this is who you are. But since I'm a participant, I have to give you a moment to correct me.
I was hoping you'd mention my associate's degree, but since you
Awesome.
did, yeah.
We can give you the honorary title of doctor, Judge Hailey.
Yeah.
Mention I'm a doctor, but I don't have a doctorate, so just the honor.
From now on we'll change Brother Haley's name to Jesse the Judge Haley. But
there you go.
The honorable
Judge
Jesse Hailey.
The honorable Judge Haley at this point.
Do we all rise?
Please.
All right. So for this first question, I'm going to go ahead and put it on the screen. Maybe after the first answer has been given, the first round of it, I'll take it off just so it doesn't keep the screen small the whole time we're doing it. The first question we're going to be trying to present our reason for is who was the greatest judge in the book of Judges? And so I will tell you what my answer is. I will mute these other two fellas. And then as soon as I say who I'm going to be arguing, Brother Haley can start his timer. So my answer for you today is Ehud. Ehud is one of those judges you may not think about as fast. He's not a Samson. He's not a Gideon. But Ehud has some of the things that makes him stand out above them, I think, in my opinion. When you look at Ehud, the first time you're introduced to him, you see that Israel's come out from under an 18-year oppression by Moab. They're in a pretty bad state. He's one of the earlier judges you find there. But the thing that makes him stand out to me is if you go through his story just verse by verse, you'll start to notice some things about him. Unlike someone like a Samson, and I could say this about some of the other answers will be given, but I'll be nice and not take any personal jabs. But unlike someone like a Samson or some of these other guys who just almost seem to stumble into it, it's like, okay, if you twist my arm, Gideon being the primary example of that, then I'll go and I'll serve you. Ehud is somebody that from the moment we're introduced to him, he's already on the ball. He's planning, he's plotting what he's going to do, and he stands out because of that. You find his story there across Judges 3, verses 15 through 19 is where I say you see he didn't stumble into it, but he took the time to plan it and properly figure out what he was going to do to be a deliverer for Israel. Then you notice one of the other things that's most interesting to me about him is that from verse 20 to 26 of that chapter, you'll note that he does it alone. This guy walks into the king's palace. He's there as a messenger. He's there to, present gifts, all these kind of things. And he gets them to shut the door and he walks up to the king. He takes the dagger and he does away at the king right there himself on the spot. And so he's interesting to me, and he stands out that a lot of judges throughout the book of Judges, now he will have an army, but a lot of judges rely entirely upon their army. Or you have an example like a Samson, or one of the names that will be mentioned later in this, or men who fought by themselves. He's interesting to me because he blends that together. He took it upon himself. He did the proper time, work, and study and preparation to do the job that he had to do. He did it by himself, and that was used to then provoke the people to get into it. That's what you notice. 30 seconds?
Yep. No, okay. I'm sorry. I was so interested in your talk that you're actually out of time.
Then can I at least just say one last thing about him?
Yes, sure.
My main point is after he got everybody stirred up and got them involved is that he produced the longest period of peace of any of the judges as far as I could find looking at it, the 80-year period he presented.
What if I never mention the name? Do I get more time to talk? Okay, I'm going with Deborah. It's a more unconventional. It's more of an unconventional choice. The only woman judge in Judges in the history of Israel. And unlike Ehud, she couldn't go in and just do everything herself. She had to have help, but she was trying to push the men. But I find this interesting. I find her she came in after 20 years of captivity. She was actually the one that followed after Ehud. And she was judging Israel at the time, but she was just a little housewife. She didn't really want to be judged. Like Brother Junior had said, someone just pushed into it. She wanted to do it. But she's saying, oh, I'll be respectful, I'll step behind the scenes. Barak, you go and do it. But Barak's like, oh, I need your help. So she actually had to go with him and strengthen the men's hand to go and to defeat Sisera. Well, actually, the king was Jabin, but Sisera was his man. Well, if we look in Judges 4 and Judges 5, we see they had a host of 900 chariots of iron. That's some. In the Bible says they mightily oppressed Israel. There's a rod of fist of iron, and so she was the kind of person that she actually wasn't scared of these 900 chariots of iron. She said, "Okay, I'll go with you." And when the men were scared, she's like, no worry. As you say down here, tranquilo. I said, I'll go with you. I'll go and I will take everything with you. But because of this, we all know the caveat there that Jael killed Sisera. But I think that really interests me, that gets me, is chapter 5. Not only did she beat the Syrian there, excuse me, she actually sang a song.
30 seconds, Brent Hoffman.
Okay, she sang a song afterwards about it. She sang a song full of doctrine and prophecies of the second coming and the millennium. So she's just someone to me that's very interesting. When the men wouldn't stand up to do it, she stood up and she said, I will do it. And then they had 40 years of rest afterward. It was about half the time of Ehud, but she was also a woman doing a man's job.
All right, hello. So my answer for today is Shamgar. He is probably one of the lesser known ones. There's quite a few where it's like, they were judges for a certain amount of time. They were from this tribe, and they judged Israel for 20 years or 13 years or whatever it might have been. The difference between them and Shamgar, though, is the fact that we don't know how long or what tribe he was from. We technically don't even know who the oppressor was, although it does say that he slew 600 Philistines. But just let me read it. He only gets one mention in the entire book. And after him was Shamgar, the son of Anath, which slew of the Philistines 600 men with an ox goad, and he also delivered Israel. And so that's it. That's all we really know about him. And the reason I chose him as the best judge is because despite the fact that he came in, it's possible he might have been during that time of peace. It might have been at the same time as Ehud was. But he still did his job. We don't know a lot about him. You might almost call him just like almost a background character in it. And as someone who grew up in church, where both my parents, my dad was never a preacher, my mom, they were just helpers. And so as I was going through, there was a lot of people I considered, but Shamgar, as being just sort of that guy that just did his job, came in, killed those, delivered Israel, killed those 600 Philistines, and did his job, and then he's done. And so for that reason, that's why I chose him.
30 seconds.
I guess more or less is just like a personal thing. Like, this guy just did his job, and so that was why I chose Shamgar.
All right. Well, I'm gonna start with Shamgar. I love an unsung hero as much as anybody. Wonderful. So you definitely got me there. But in the conversation, I just think the fact that, 600 men, incredible. But the fact that we don't know a lot about him, and you actually left like 20 seconds to tell why he was even better. But I will. But Shamgar, obviously, great. Now we get down between Deborah and Ehud. And that's actually a lot more difficult than I thought. The thing I do love about Deborah, she could have been in one of the next arguments about humility. Honestly, you kind of brought that point up. Really cool that she was willing to do something, even though it was a man's place to do it, but she was willing. The prophecy was a great argument, man. That's a great point. Actually, been able to read some prophecy. But I think I am going to have to go with the eagerness and planning and the cunning of Ehud. The fact that he went alone because he could go alone and just get rid of the king and that be it, versus Deborah leading an army. Boy, I'm flip-flopping here a little bit. But I'm going to stay with my original thing, and I'm going to stay with Ehud, but it is by a very thin margin, even though I thought it was Deborah really come close there.
Well, if I can say this, the prophecy was a great argument to bring in, because it was, if I had been the judge, I would have had a hard time once you bring in the spiritual side of it like that to disagree with you. Mm-hmm. If I had got to finish my thoughts, I was going to point out that he also led an army as well afterwards. So he's like a checklist of every good thing that a judge had. But that's why I said I'll bite my tongue and I'll just take what I got out there. But Ehud is actually not
against the judge. The Deborah, I was. Anyway, Deborah again. Just the fact that a woman leading an army in that day. Yeah. So anyway, but
you actually shot me in the foot because I was going to take an answer that kind of like what Brother Kline did with Shamgar. I was going to take an answer that is my favorite, even if it's going to be hard for me to argue. It'd be easy for you to rebut it if you hadn't took Deborah, and that was Barak, because because I like the story there so much. Like you talk about with the chariots of iron and all of that. If we were doing rebuttals, then I would have rebutted on Deborah one thing, and that's the fact that it's debatable whether she's even counted as a judge. And that would have been my one rebuttal. And then the one thing I would have added in on Shamgar, if y'all don't mind me throwing these notes out there, if anything, it's just to help people in the future, if nothing else, but it's also for the purpose of what we're talking about, that this is a way to learn the Bible a little better for people, is I would have brought out the fact that with Shamgar is that he rose to the occasion when, if you study the story, the Philistines actually had taken away weapons from people. That's why he used the ox goad. And he really is such an example of just getting your hands dirty and getting whatever you have to go to the fight. So that would have been one of the notes I would have threw in there on Shamgar.
And I'll just throw in an extra note on Ehud, and that was the fact of him using his handicap, and not, which we don't think of it today. I don't say that in a personal way to anybody that's left-handed, as if anybody would actually be offended by that. But
I do, though.
But that would be considered a handicap during that time. But it was actually his handicap that he had they didn't even think to check his sword. They didn't even think to frisk him on that, that inner right thigh, because, of course, why would you go for that? Because they're assuming he's right-handed. So, again, just for the folks out there, I think that's a great point. And, Brent is a basketball referee, and if I went to the replay, man, I may have to fix something here. But at the same time, when you're a referee, you make a call and you got to stick to it. But,
right, that's right. You can't show indiscretion. You can't show indecision.
Yeah, and I'm not doing that at all, am I? So I'm doing good.
It seems to me like you're judging it fair. I mean, I'm not saying it because I got the point. The very fact that it was right there on the edge, I feel like you're doing your job fine.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the extra notes, and you guys are welcome too. Like to come. That's why I'm not doing the rebuttals like people would normally do in this kind of format, where you come in and you get like 20 seconds to say, "Well, Brother Hoffman's wrong because of this." That's why I'm not doing the rebuttals, but I'm giving a chance afterwards, after the decision has been made, that if you have any notes, you guys are welcome to throw them in there as well. So I don't want you to feel like you just get your 2 minutes to shine and then you have to be quiet after that.
Those 2 minutes go fast, man.
They do.
They do. Yes.
I knew they would. That's why I mentioned before we could change the format a little bit, but we're locked in now. So we've set the course and the ship will sail.
We're synced.
All right. We're synced. That part's very true. Okay, then with that, we made it through our first question. I like the answers that were given. I think you guys did a great job. I'm just speaking this as the moderator. I'm not the judge, but I am, still moderating to some degree. I think you guys did a great job, and you understood very well what I was looking for with the format of this, because you did a good job of presenting what you have. The one note I'll give, though, is make sure, even if you have to just stammer over a word and stutter to get to the finish line of your time, is never stop early and never admit defeat. Because if I would have come out the gate and said that I would have picked Barak, then I would have lost. That's why I kept my mouth closed and didn't say nothing about that. In fact, I didn't admit that the reason I went with Ehud was originally because I was trying to leave Gideon and some of the other more well-known ones open to my guest, because I didn't want to be greedy and jump in there and take the easy picks.
If you think about it, Gideon was a horrible judge.
That's probably true too.
Yeah. Now that we're over with that, I mean, I obviously, when I was looking through, I really did come to admire Shamgar just because of his position and what we know about him, what little we know about him. But growing up, my favorite judge was always Ehud, personally. So as soon as I saw that you chose, I was like,
then I messed up. I took Ehud because I thought I would be the only one who would take him. So,
well, I feel like you fell on the sword for Shamgar, so that's worth something, to give him some honorable mention here.
Yeah.
Shamgar deserves some. I like, actually, like, if you ask me who is my favorite, and to a degree, he's going to be up there on the list because of just there's so little, but what he does is incredible.
Yeah.
All right, then we're going to keep the ball rolling, and we're going to move into our second question. And this one, the order of answering is going to change. So Brother Hoffman is going to go first. Brother Kline is going to go second. Then I'll go last.
If I could throw one last thing in there, I know it just came up. But the thing when you just said that about Shamgar, the no weapons, everything, no excuses for these people.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. Not any of these judges. I mean, we know Gideon came, but these guys, it's no excuses. They they took it, they did what they could. So I just had to get that out there.
Well, that's what I mean. To me, when you study the time period that the people went by the byways instead of walking on the road because the Philistines had oppressed them so much, and then they've taken their weapons away from them to keep them from ever rising back up. And he takes a plow. I mean, I mean not a plow, but an ox goad, I guess. It takes an ox goad, a pointy stick, and goes to war. It's an impressive story. So our second question, as you see it on the screen, is aside from Jesus, this is another one of those places where I had to put a strong caveat in there to keep people from using trump cards, where it's like, okay, I can't argue with that. I just better be quiet. Aside from Jesus, who is the greatest example of humility in the Bible? And so I had two possible answers. When Brother Kline told me what he wanted to do, I'm going to just go ahead and admit that that was one of those answers I was considering, but I'm more than happy to let him have it because I feel just as strongly about my second answer. And I don't say that to take anything away from him. I'm just actually feeling that I'm giving him a point, and I should have kept my mouth shut because I'm saying he's got a legitimate answer to this. So at this point, I'm going to be quiet. But anyways, aside from Jesus, who is the greatest example of humility, I'm going to be quiet before I give any more points away to anybody. And Brother Hoffman is going to give.
Okay, I'm assuming you said okay. Mine's a little bit off the wall here, not off the wall, but a little bit not as popular. But I'm gonna go with the Roman centurion from Matthew 8. Matthew 8, the Roman centurion. He's not named in the Bible, and you say, why would you pick someone like that? But this is the story where the Roman centurion had a servant that was sick of the palsy and was dying. And then he begged Jesus Christ. He said, please come and heal my servant. And he said, I know you have so much power. And it's actually the only time in the Bible that's mentioned that Jesus marveled at somebody for good. He marveled another time in Mark 6 about their unbelief, but here he actually marveled for this man. And he actually marveled for his faith. But if you look at something else, he marveled for his humility as well. I feel that because he said in verse Matthew 5:8 says, the centurion answered, 7 said, and Jesus saith unto him, I will come and heal him. The centurion answered and said, Lord, I'm not worthy that thou shouldest come under my roof. You think about it, this time the Romans hated the Jews. They called them dogs. They kicked them. They thought they were awful. And he's seeing just some itinerant Jewish preacher. This centurion has rule over 100 men. He says, I'm a man with authority. I say do this, and those men do it, and they do this and do that. But I'm not worthy of you even coming into my door. I'm a wretched human being. He said, but you just say the word, and then my servant will be healed. And the story is repeated in Luke 7 as well. We realize that he actually loved the Jews so much that he built them a temple. He built them a synagogue. He went out of his way to treat people, his servant. And we have to think of it. Back then, servants were just basically like dogs. I mean, they had no value. They had nothing. But he was humble enough to love his servant so much that he actually went to Jesus Christ and asked him to heal him. And Jesus said, oh, yeah, I'll come to your man. If Jesus said, I'll come to your house, like, please come to my house. This guy said, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy of you even walking in my door. He showed such great humility that he said, just say the word. And show great faith, but also with the faith, I find that he found great humility, that he would lower himself to worry for Jews. The Romans thought
15 seconds.
Okay, they worried for his servant, someone that he could easily be replaceable. And he said, Jesus, I'm not worthy of you coming to my house.
All right, so as soon as I was presented with this question, my first thought was John the Baptist. And I know we're not supposed to be dogmatic, but that's kind of something that I'm very certain of. But either way, let me present my case then, I guess. When we first find mention of John the Baptist in the book of John, when he was approached by the Pharisees, it says that he confessed and denied not, but confessed, I am not the Christ. And they asked him, what art thou, Elias? And he saith unto them, it says, I am not. Art thou that prophet? And he answered, no. Then said he unto them, who art thou? That we may give an answer to them. What sayest thou of thyself? He said, I am the voice of one crying in the wilderness, make straight the way of the Lord, as said the prophet Isaiah. And then as the time goes on, he says, the one whose shoes latchet I am not worthy to loosen. And when Jesus said he wanted to be baptized, he said, I should be baptized of you. He never made really anything big out of the fact that he was the forerunner. I mean, he could have gone around bragging about, oh, look at me, I'm the forerunner. I'm this great person that God has chosen. But he basically made himself nothing more than just a voice crying in the wilderness, preparing the way for the Lord. And I think he really sums it up nice here in chapter 3, in verse number, I'm in the wrong chapter, chapter 3. He says in verse John chapter 3 and verse number what am I at here? Verse number 30. Yes, he says, "He must increase, but I must decrease." And I think that's a very important lesson for us to learn. But I think it really shows his humility because he's saying, in order for Jesus to really increase, I must first increase. He must increase, but I must decrease. So in order for Jesus to truly get the preeminence, I have to lower myself. I have to be that humble one that shows that Jesus is the greatest of all, and I'm not, basically. So
I'm going to be presenting Barnabas, and I'll go ahead and take the defeat on the fact that I gave a point away by admitting that John the Baptist is a good answer. I will, because of this, in fairness, also throw something Brother Hoffman's way that I was pleasantly surprised by the way he presented his. Now that I've wasted part of my time arguing for my opponents, let me jump into mine real fast because I can talk fast. With Barnabas, the reason why he stands out to me, and I'm going to give a little bit of a rebuttal in just one part, is that yes, humility towards God is important, but Barnabas is an example to me of humility because it's not just towards God and human flesh, even towards his fellow man. He's a tremendous example of humility and a servant's heart. So the first time we ever meet him, Acts chapter 4, verse 36 and 37, he's selling all his goods, giving it to the church. He's willing to give of himself and put himself low so that the church can prosper and others can be taken care of. Second time you see him is Acts 9:27. It's when Paul's still kind of an outcast to the church and he sticks his neck out. I mean, you talk about humility and letting go of all your pride, putting your reputation and everything on the line for somebody else is a pretty big step of humility, in my opinion. It's certainly a step of care, at least. Then the third time you see him, and this is the one that stands out to me the most, is that he is leading a revival at, to me, what is the greatest church in the New Testament, the church at Antioch. And he's leading this great revival. He's there. There's no reason for him to step down or back away, but he realized that Paul would be better for that church than he would
30
be.
seconds.
So he stepped down and he let Paul come in and fill the seat and take over as the preacher there. And you even see just a little bit later where he stands in the back and lets Paul speak. So he gets recognized as being Jupiter and Paul as Mercurius because of that relationship where he's willing to step back and let people come first.
Well, some great arguments. Obviously, I agree that Abraham had a great one with John the Baptist. That is a hard one to beat, considering that his whole ministry is pointing others to Christ. He could have got a lot of attention. He could have been known more. So John the Baptist, a great one, obviously. Barnabas as well. But there's a couple things as judge I think that I can't help but mark off a little bit. All right. So for one thing, and this goes to Brother Brent, he threw a nice little I feel in there. And then Brother Junior threw in my opinion. Well, we know it's your opinion because you're sharing it with us. I'm starting to get into this judging thing now. Sorry.
You're doing your job.
All right. But I will say one of the marks off of Brother Hailey's argument, because Barnabas is a tremendous argument as well, is as he was talking about one of the points concerning Barnabas, he was talking about, that being humility. And I'm sitting there thinking, humility, is that the best way to describe that? And then Brother Hailey actually helped me because then he says, or care, humility or care. I'm like, yeah, care. I think that's the word I was looking for, rather than humility in the certain point. Regardless, these are all great men of, and again, John the Baptist being hard to beat. However, I believe I've got to give it to the centurion. The thing that got me is honestly, even when you said the centurion, I'm just like, really, that's where you're going? So I went from there to being like, wow, yeah, okay, let me remember what it was like for the Romans and the Jews. Again, humbly coming to a Jewish rabbi, no, I'm not worthy for you to come to my house. Just knowing again that they could treat Jews like dogs. The centurion could have, we know, right, asked Jesus to bear his bags or something, but instead he came in such a humble way. His humility toward his servant, his humility toward the Jews. I mean, how hard would it have been to be a Roman centurion and that you're doing all of this, love and attention and care, but that's a humble thing to show that. And I mean, I wouldn't want to be the guy that goes back to the barracks or whatever it is, being the Jew lover.
Right.
So because of that, I got to say that Brother Brent won that based on those things. The centurion wins that one.
Well, I just preached on that 2 Sundays ago, so it's really fresh in my mind too. So unfair advantage.
Let me point out one thing for the people listening, is that one of the credentials for Brother Hailey judging is he doesn't get to go off of his personal knowledge of the Bible and his own opinion. He's going off of what's presented, because otherwise we all know that John the Baptist would have won if we just went off of, our opinion of the scripture. He was going off of what's presented, and Brother Hoffman, actually, I was blown away by the answer, because I said the same thing when I said it. Really? Because the thing Jesus marveled at is his faith. He's an example of faith.
Yeah.
So I was in the same boat. Okay. I mean, if you want to lose, yeah.
Yeah, totally. And that was the thing too. I'm just like, he marveled at his faith, brother. Like the whole time, I'm like, dude, you're like, and I think that's the thing that got me, is that argument. It is hard to argue. It's not too hard for me to argue from an ignorant, or listen from an ignorant position, because I feel like I lived there pretty well. But I just got to say that, that it really went from, you started off here centurion, then it went even further down when like, oh yeah, Jesus marveled at his faith. I'm like, okay, this isn't a faith argument. To then all of a sudden building it up. So yeah, the argument itself again is what really.
That's the benefit to this format, is sometimes taking a left field swing like that is enough. It's enough to actually, when you have something like that that's a clear answer, it's enough to get you over that hurdle. Whereas Barnabas, it's a safe answer, won't actually do that. That's why it's actually a unique way to look at it in that sense. But John the Baptist was argued well. It's just that's the problem, I think, with John the Baptist, is you already know that. So it's hard to bring out that information in a way that after somebody else has come in with a hard swing like that, it's hard to jump over that and ever get past that. Because of that, because I think actually Brother Kline did almost the same thing with Shamgar in the last one, that Shamgar was such a left field answer that you didn't have to say a lot, just to present any reason at all was enough to make him jump ahead like that. And that's why he was able to come up there with these other judges who have a lot of information about them. Was because it was a good answer, but it was also a left field one. So it's like, okay, well, tell me why you think this. So I think you're doing a good job judging, I guess, is my point in that.
And I guess if I had another thing for John the Baptist, which again, I know it's the obvious answer, but he knew that, we know he had doubts at the end, but knowing that Jesus is the Christ, I don't know that the centurion knew that. I don't know that even, so it's like you're comparing.
That was the point of my rebuttal.
To humble himself. It's one thing to humble yourself to this Jewish healer that must be some sort of prophet or something, versus, oh my goodness, this is God in the flesh. This is the Christ. This is the anointed. I mean, but nonetheless, we preachers today, going back to Brother Abraham's argument, there's preachers today that don't mind trying to heap some of God's glory on themselves. So Abraham, it could have been very easy for him to do as well. So
I think,
John the Baptist.
Well, I think if anything, the only thing that was needed to maybe edge John the Baptist back into the lead again was to emphasize what I tried to emphasize with Barnabas, but I was running out of time. That's the fact that he was in a position where people, if he'd have just kept going the course, people would have been bowing down at his feet, and he still chose to step back. If that was emphasized a little more, John the Baptist, I think he probably would have pulled ahead on that one.
Actually,
I don't know your mind. I'm just guessing.
That's another thing I forgot to mention. I think even in that exact same passage, John chapter 3, people at times are trying to put him at odds with Jesus, where they were like trying to say, are you at the same level as Jesus? And each time he was like, no. And that's why he said, he must increase, but I must decrease. It's not about me. It's about Jesus. And so that's probably a point I should have made. But
that would have been the winning point, I think.
Yeah, that would have been.
Yeah.
I think if you had made that, then I wouldn't have even made my argument afterwards. But, all right, but that's the fun of this kind of format. So, all right, well then, Brother Kline, you actually get to go first on the next question. The question is, what is the most common cause of prayers being answered with a no?
Okay, so my answer is pride, which the Bible clearly states is basically the root of all of our problems. In fact, if we go to James chapter 4 and verse number 5 and 6, do you think that the scripture saith in vain, the spirit that dwelleth in us lusteth envy? But he giveth more grace, wherefore he saith, God resisteth the proud, but giveth grace unto the humble. And unfortunately, I didn't write it down, but there's another passage of scripture that says now I'm forgetting what it actually said, is only by pride cometh contention. That's where everything comes from. All the contention comes from pride. And to understand where God, his feelings are about that regarding humility, he says in Psalm 51 and verse number 17, the sacrifice of God are a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart. O God, thou wilt not despise. And Isaiah 57 and verse number 15, he says, for thus saith the high and lofty one, that inhabiteth eternity, whose name is holy. I dwell in the high and holy place with him also that is of a contrite and humble spirit, to revive the spirit of the humble and to revive the heart of the contrite ones. And so I know I'm pretty sure one of the answers is sin and things like that. But even when it comes to our our own lusts that we want to consume it on, all of that stems from our pride. The idea that somehow either we feel as though we're owed something or as though we're holding something back that we don't want to give to God. And the Bible says that God resisteth the proud and giveth grace to the humble. And so anytime we come before God with a proud spirit, there's people that may even come to God in salvation. In their hearts, they feel as though God's getting something special when in reality we're not. And so for that, I believe that pride is probably in my opinion, the biggest reason why prayers are not answered.
Then my answer to this is going to be unbelief. From a very similar perspective, the idea that at the heart of most of our problems, most of the issues we have in our spiritual life, unbelief is going to be at the root of that. Even, for example, when we talk about the devil and his fall in pride, I think even that's traced to some degree of unbelief, that he doesn't regard God as he ought to, and that's why he fell in pride and thought he could be equal with him. But my primary argument for this from the Bible is, of course, going to be James 1, 6, and 7, where he says, ask not in faith wavering, for any man thinking that he'll receive will receive nothing in that cause. That God tells us. And my other arguments from that would be Hebrews 11, 6, without faith it is impossible to please God. Romans 14, 23, whatsoever is not of faith is sin. That one of the things we see at the heart of any spiritual issue is going to be a lack of faith. When you ask without faith is presented, I would give the argument that the faith of a grain of a mustard seed would be enough to move a mountain. That it's not even that a great degree of faith is required. It's just that we tend to lack faith or lack the knowledge of how to exercise the faith that we do have. And so I think most oftentimes deep down at the heart of why people's prayers go unanswered, a lot of times it is going to be a lack of faith. That is going to come down to somewhere deep down inside that unbelief has creeped in, and maybe that unbelief has led to some of these other problems that could be presented. But unbelief is going to be one of the primary issues you find at the heart of just about any of this. And so you keep looking like you want to say time, so I assumed that I was running out of time. Okay.
You have 30 seconds. So.
Okay, then I can keep it. But if you look at this, when you look at the primary reasons given throughout the Bible, there's a few of them given that God presents why prayers go unanswered or why they're answered as a no. This is one where he just outright says, if you lack faith, if your faith is the issue, you don't trust that God's going to do this, or you're wavering in your faith about this, then don't think you're going to receive anything of God. It's a no in that cause.
All right. Well, the Bible says it's because you ask amiss, but I'm also going to paraphrase it for selfishness. James 4, 3 and 4 says, ye ask and receive not because ye ask amiss, that ye may consume it upon your own lusts. Ye adulterers and adulteresses, know ye not that friendship of the world is enmity with God? Whosoever therefore will be a friend of the world is an enemy of God. So people are asking for their own stuff. They're asking for, and people nowadays constantly do that. I firmly believe we're in the last times. Something I believe, and if we look at 2 Timothy 3:2 says, for men shall be lovers of the most, 3:1. This know also that in the last days perilous times shall come. For men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, and unholy. So I think this all goes, and especially nowadays, everyone's praying for the stupid things. They pray for $1 million. They pray for a nice car. They pray for a big house. They pray for a nice TV. They're asking it and they don't get it because they're asking amiss. And why are they asking? Because they're consuming it on their own lust. They're not consuming it on someone else. They're consuming it on themselves. And I think this goes hand in hand with 2 Timothy 3:2 here. It says, love is your own selves. I mean, just walk around the world right now. Everyone's doing what they can for number one, looking out for number one. And even Christians nowadays, unfortunately, and they're praying, God, even pastors, I want a big church so everyone can see how big my church is. And God's like, no, you want it because you want to be propped up. Unlike John the Baptist, right? Who said, he must increase, I must decrease. They're wanting to increase. And that's it's just something that's really prevalent nowadays. Titus 3:3 says, for we ourselves also were sometimes foolish, disobedient, deceived, serving divers lusts and pleasures, and malice and envy, hateful and hating one another. That's the world we live in nowadays. Everyone's asking for their own stuff and looking out for what they want. And God said, sorry, you're not getting it, because if you pray for someone else, and I always teach my people this, I said, we're going to pray and we're going to ask things, but we're going to ask for other people. We're not asking nice things for ourselves, because that's asking amiss.
All right. Well, thing is, it's interesting. I believe every one of you started in the book of James. And every one of you mentioned reasons why God doesn't answer prayer. The question is the number one reason that God doesn't answer prayer.
The most common.
Most common reason that God doesn't answer prayer. Okay, that doesn't change my where I'm coming from, but the most common reason that God doesn't answer prayer. Okay, so we have pride, unbelief, asking amiss, asking evilly to consume it on your own lust. Obviously, all are there, very common. However, every one of you actually gave Abraham started, Junior threw one toward Abraham's way, then Brent threw a good argument toward Abraham's way for the most common reason. One of the very first things that Junior brought up was the devil and his pride. Right after Abraham's argument, so unbelief, but he was associating the unbelief with the pride, because obviously that falls in there. And then on Brent's argument, I couldn't help but the same thing, asking, looking out for number one. I'm praying for myself. I'm praying for the needs of myself. And even specifically, you had brought up, what we were saying. You were bringing up one of the top humility guys, John the Baptist. He must increase, I must decrease. So it's like you're bringing in John the Baptist, which is the humble guy, which was the opposite of that. It's pride. So without trying to be like some guy that's trying to seriously, Abraham won this one hands down with pride.
There you go, Abraham. Honestly, I actually, as soon as I put my answer in, I had buyer's remorse. I'm like, I should fix it.
That's okay. I wish you would let me have yours, because I think I could have sold that one better, because I didn't believe in my answer. So the reason I started with what I said about pride was actually to cut it out, because to cut under that by saying, well, the root of pride comes from unbelief.
Right.
So that's because I knew it was a good answer. That's why I try not to get too mean in rebuttals, but I was trying to cut his feet a little bit from him, because I intentionally, what I thought would have been, because pride actually was still a better answer than what I would have picked, but I intentionally left open what I assumed would be the next choice, which was sin. I left that open because I'm trying to be a gentleman to my guests this time. In the future, I'll be a savage, but right now I'm trying to be a gentleman. And so I left that answer open, and then I was kind of surprised when he took it, and he didn't take it, and he took pride. And like I said, Brother Hoffman got his answers locked in first. It's like, well, okay.
Yeah, I wasn't happy with my miss. I should have gone back and changed it.
I would, like I said, I would have took that instead of the one I had.
But I'll tell you though, even in that case though, like, then I'm throwing this out here for you guys and whoever else listens to consider, but just when it comes to sin, and taking sin, years ago, I just study and read, and I can't remember where I came across it, but just the idea that the pride that's behind sin, the sin of pride that's behind all of our sin, that we think we deserve this, or we think we're better, whatever the thing is. It seems like pride is, you talk about sin, it's just such kind of part and parcel. I know that pride is a sin in and of itself, but it just seems to be just a cousin, a brother, other side of the coin. I don't know, but it just seems so closely associated with so many other sins.
It's a legitimately good answer. When he first said it, I had almost the Roman centurion reaction, like, really? Because that's not the one most people put on their list. Like when you hear preachers preach on it, they don't normally mention pride.
Unbelief. If you would have just said pride or unbelief and just left it at there, I'd have been like, well, come on, unbelief. Most common, but yeah, it ended up with the pride.
I'm gonna be honest with you. The reason why I had buyer's remorse, as Brother Hoffman puts it, and I kind of stalled out at the last half of my answer, as I had no idea, was because as I was talking about it, I started realizing that I'm that bad guy that if you just believe a little better, God's gonna heal your brother. I started realizing that if I seriously commit to this answer and don't pull any punches or put any caveats in there, and really try to sell it, then I'm the faith healer at this point.
Well, you forgot the seed faith promise thing though. So.
Yeah, that's why I'm just to be honest with you. His answer was better than mine, so it's not like that is what cost me. I already lost before I started, but that was one of the reasons why I stalled out in the last half of my answers, because I realized halfway through speaking, it's like, oh man, if I commit to this and really sell it, then I'm that guy who's telling, well, if you just believed a little harder, God would heal you. So.
As far as yeah, for sure. But the argument for the amiss, you gave that argument from start to finish. It's just that pride.
He undercut you.
Saying, if it would have just started with the miss and not thinking about pride, you gave that from start to finish. So that was. If I had to judge just on the debate thing of it, you definitely filled all your time with that to where I didn't have much. You seem really confident in that.
Oh, okay.
It was a good presentation. You presented it well. The problem is, I don't know if Brother Kline was this savage that he knew what he was doing when he picked his answer, if he was really just that into it, or what. But he picked an answer that it has potential to undercut anybody else's answer, and especially Brother Hoffman's.
And the fact that he went first, I think even the timing of it could have even played into it, because I'm just like, pride. Yeah, pride. Where if it's at the end, maybe I could have connected, went back to pride, but.
And I'll even give it the note of like the somewhat left field. It's not necessarily the first answer that comes to mind when I ask you that question. Even lends to it. So it was a good answer. It was a good presentation. I just, like I said, I had to take the loss on that one halfway through. I had already lost anyways, but I had to just go ahead and take it because I realized that I couldn't, with true conviction, argue this all the way through.
Yeah, you laid down on the battle.
Brought me some coffee, so you guys better watch out for this last one.
Uh-oh.
All right. The question we're going to be answering is, what one book besides the Bible? Again, obviously, we got to always take the trump cards off the table. But what one book besides the Bible would you recommend every believer read? And so this is really just going to be a straight sales pitch. It's going to be hard to throw any facts or statistics. I mean, if you have them, throw them. But it's going to be primarily just us giving our reason why we think you should read this book. So with that said, I'm going first. So I'll throw the name out, and then you can start my timer. All right. The book I'm going to be arguing for is Heartbeats of the Holy. I think most preachers probably know this book at least a little bit, have probably come across it at some point. Admittedly, it's not one that a lot of lay people in the church necessarily have come across, but the reason why I recommend it for even lay people is because this book for me did more to speak to the experience of what it's like to be in ministry than any book I've ever read. But it's not just written to preachers. It's also written to the people sitting in a congregation to help you understand your pastor and how you affect him and how your relationship to him has a pull on him. It's written by Keith E. Nouse. It's a cheap, easy book to get. That's another selling point for it, I guess. It's easy and cheap. A lot of people give them away for free. For any preacher, it's a must read because it's one of the few books put me to tears. It's one of the few books I sat down and read it straight through because it spoke so much to my heart of what it was like in ministry and helped me to understand what it was like with my pastor and how I was affecting him in my choices.
That's not no worries. I had not heard that book of yours. So the book I'm recommending is called A Tale of Three Kings by Gene Edwards. And if you get it on clearance for $2 like I did, it's even better. There, I try to put in the middle there. Tale of Three Kings. And it's not just for men in the ministry. It's a study in brokenness. It's a study of, first of all, patience, humility, not taking things into your own hands. It's a story of Saul, David, and Absalom, and the contrast of how David treated Absalom and how David treated Saul. And how we know the story that David wouldn't kill Saul, wouldn't take over him. but also showed him how he kind of humbly stepped aside, let Absalom go for him. It teaches us how not to take things in our own hands, to wait on the Lord's timing, to not get ahead of the Lord, because as Christians, many times we tend to get ahead of the Lord. And this just shows you, wait on the Lord. Lord's got everything under control. Have faith in the Lord, because despite no matter how bad things are going to look for David, he still came out on top because he trusted in the Lord. And it's a study of just how to be broken and waiting on the Lord. It's a fantastic book.
All right. My choice was A Shepherd's Look at Psalm 23 by Philip Keller. I chose this because not only is it going through and sort of expositing a piece of the Word of God, but it's also showing it from a shepherd's perspective. And often, and another reason why I choose this, number one, it's also small. You can probably get through it in about a day if you take the time to do it, or even do it as a devotional. It breaks it up into each part of the psalm, and the Bible often refers to us as God's sheep. And what better way for us to understand our relationship with God than understanding the psalm and perspective of how He is our shepherd, and how He does lead us, how He does take us through the valley of the shadow of death, how He does provide for us, lead us by those still waters, and all those different things. And so this is one that I would definitely recommend. And there's over 1 million copies in print, as it says on here. And so I'm sure it's one that can be easily accessible for very cheap. So that's my answer.
All right. Well, those are this is a tough one to do the game winner on a book, and especially 3 books I haven't read. But again, I guess that gives a benefit, because now I get to just totally go from y'all's arguments.
You get to decide who convinced you to go read a book.
Yeah, that's right. Well, they were. I want to read them all. It sounds interesting. I love Abraham's deal. I mean, how many times were we referred to as sheep? So Psalm 23 expository. Everyone seemed to have a cheap side out there, so that was
We're Baptist.
wash.
We're Baptist. I mean, come on.
Yeah, that was for sure. And I like the devotional ministry heartbeat for the holy.
Heartbeats of the Holy.
Heartbeats of the Holy. But I've got to go with Brent. I'm going with the second guy this time, but the reason why is because I'm giving some credit to the fact that he very gracefully shot down a couple of your arguments for your book, Brother Hailey, right away. Okay, well, it's not just for pastors. You said that about yours too, but then it seemed, but there was the sign. But there was a couple different. I wish I could remember the other one, but just in the first 15 seconds, he's just like boom, boom. It was shots fired. Like, it's better than yours because of this. But it wasn't just that, but it did seem to have that. That they all three had some broad appeal, to be in the book that you'd recommend. And it's you, so you're recommending it. You're a preacher. You, of course, want somebody. That's a good part for the heartbeats of a holy. Yeah, and then, between the arguments, the arguments for the Shepherd's Look at Psalm 23 and the 3 Kings is close, but I just got to give some credit there, because it was done in such a way to where it didn't seem mean at all, but it seemed like you were really shooting down Brother Hailey's book. So
I even would give him the point just on the ground that what he presented, his book has the most intriguing. Because I tell you, mine talks about the heart of a minister, but his has to me a more appealing sell line that you're contrasting these 3 Bible characters. So I'm actually in support of your decision on that. With Brother Kline's, I think if anything, he should have got a point because he actually knew more information about his book, like how many were there. He should have got some boost for that. But also, it's debatable as to whether the fact that it's a commentary on the Bible, when you have the caveat except for the Bible, is whether that should take a shot or help it. I'm not sure. That's all up to the judge. I have no idea whether that should help or hurt the answer. But no, I'm full support actually on that one. That I think of the books, the one that listening to the sales pitches, even my own pitch, I would be more likely to go by Brother Hoffman's as well. So
yeah,
just on the ground.
I think my, and if I was to rank them, which we're not doing that, but I guess I am now. I probably would just go and go. I'm the judge, so it's just my judgment, and it's just I love the idea of again, he mentioned how often we're referred to as sheep, and so, I could really see a big benefit in that in the broad scheme as well. So that was a close one on that one.
But I took some personal shots on mine, but I don't think that I think they got missed in how fast I was presenting it and how little time I spent on it. And that's the note that this is one of the few books that's ever brought me to tears and one of the few books I sat down and read straight through. That was my primary sale, but I think I got lost in the shuffle.
Yeah.
I will say that you mentioned it. You've seen where it's been given away before. May have also been a good sales pitch for it, or maybe a not sales pitch. Just wait to go to some sort of meeting where they're giving it away.
So it's a pitch to read it, though, as you can probably get it for free.
Read it, right? Yeah.
All right, well, then we can officially declare that we have a winner, the champion of the first of these, Brother Brent Hoffman. That means he has to come back to defend his title. But Brother Hoffman is the winner. I don't know if it helped that he got his answers in first or if he's just better at presenting them. But Brother Hoffman did a good job tonight. I appreciate Brother Kline did a good job. I still am impressed that you pulled it out with pride winning that one because I didn't expect it to win, just like the same thing with the Centurion. But it was once you presented it, both cases, once you presented your answer, like, oh, okay, yeah, that's a good answer then. Both times, though, when I read it, when you sent it to me, it's like, really? But once you presented it, it's like, okay, well, actually, pride is just such a good example of that. That I don't know if you orchestrated that. If so, then you're some Machiavellian level stuff on that, because you really cut out everything that Brother Hoffman could say. That's why I took a quick jab to try to save mine, but instead it backfired on me. Mm-hmm. But it was a good answer for that. So I appreciate you fellas doing this. I hope for those who have been a part of watching along with us and following it, that it's been just an interesting way to look at your Bible, learn some information you didn't know, and grow in your knowledge of the Bible, because that is the point for something like this. So with that, we look forward to next month trying to put one of these together again. I don't know if Brother Hoffman's going to be busy here in the near future. He may not be able to come defend his title so soon.
I think that's next month, even August. So next month.
So then we have to beat you next month so that when you have to go back for furlough, you're free. You don't have to worry about any titles. But I appreciate Brother Hailey coming in as a judge. His church had a big day. We also had a big day yesterday. We were celebrating our 4-year anniversary. They were celebrating 10 or
10. Yeah.
Their 10-year anniversary. So I know he had a very busy weekend, and that's why instead of getting him to be a contestant, we thought it was a good idea to get him to be a judge. That also allowed me the chance to jump in and get my hands dirty and show that I'm not above getting involved in this as well. I'm not just going to throw everybody else to the wolves. But I do appreciate everyone who was a part of it, you guys taking the time out. I really enjoyed this. I think it went even maybe a little better than I thought it would. So I'm excited to try doing another one of these in the near future. And I hope for everybody who is watching that you also enjoyed this as well. What I encourage you and remind you is that to submit your answers to what you think. You can give your own personal answer if you want in the comments. If you write me a 2-minute comment, it takes me 2 minutes to read it. I'm probably not going to read why you thought so, but you can give me your short answers that you would have presented. Also, I would really like to see people telling what they thought as far as who they thought should have won. It's not going to change the outcome, but I'll mention it especially if it was different. Like if you differ with Brother Hailey, he has the final judgment, but your voice will be heard when we do the next one. I'll speak up and say that the audience disagreed with him if that's the case, or if you agree with him, I'll speak up to that. So be sure to let us know. Just remember, the big caveat for your judgment is it has to be based off the argument that was given and not your own personal opinion on the subject, because otherwise it's hard to have a competition, because it's always going to be you just trying to figure out what the judge thinks. So I appreciate the guys. I'm glad that it kept a good spirit. I never felt like anything was meanly presented. I really had a lot of fun with it. And I'm actually almost want to compete next time instead of being the judge next time, because I enjoyed it a lot. Only thing is, next time I'll pull off the gloves. I'm not going to I'm going to start being a gentleman. I'm not going to let people take it. No, I'm just joking. All right. So I appreciate everything. And we'll go ahead and close this out.